Well, if you're tuning into Tuesday's MLB All-Star Game, hoping to see some St. Louis Cardinals representation, I've got bad news for you. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer recording with you here on Monday evening, July 15th, 2024. Back in the saddle, despite no Cardinal game to break down tonight, we do have plenty of topics to get into, including Ryan Helsley out of the All-Star Game, will not pitch in Tuesday's contest between the NL and the AL All-Stars. We'll talk about why that is and what we think of it now that the Cardinals are left without a team representative that's actually going to be active for the game. We'll talk about the home run derby that took place on Monday night and whether or not that was the worst national anthem before a sporting event in the history of forever. You can weigh in on that below in the comments if you heard it. If you haven't heard it, don't seek it out. It was awful. Bobby Witt darn near won the thing. We'll talk about a little bit about the Derby and what I thought of the presentation from ESPN. And we'll actually talk a little bit about one team in particular that has already announced itself as a buyer ahead of the trade deadline with a trade that was made over the weekend. It maybe was a deal that fell under the radar a little bit, but I think it's very interesting that this team has elected to be pretty aggressive in terms of its pursuit of improving and trying to make sure it gets at least a wild card spot. And do we suspect the Cardinals are going to act similarly, trying to make the bold moves or even the intermediate moves that might be necessary to improve this roster on the fringes and find their way into a postseason spot? Plus, we will mention some of our thoughts on the day 2 picks for the St. Louis Cardinals in the MLB draft. Obviously, the last episode of b-schaeff Daily, hot and heavy on J.J. Weatherholt. We spent almost an hour talking about the number 7 overall selection in the MLB draft from Sunday night. You can check out that video on the channel. You can also find that episode and all episodes of b-schaeff Daily, the daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast that you as a Cardinals fan need to make sure you're listening to on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just search b-schaeff Daily. It's an exciting time for the podcast and the YouTube channel as we have undergone quite a bit of growth over the past few months this season. But if you haven't subscribed on YouTube yet, well, you should do so. And the link to the brand new Discord is also right there in the video description here. If you wanted to hop into a St. Louis Cardinals Discord channel, I think they call it a server actually on that app. But a lot of Cardinals fans talking with one another daily. And I think it's going to be really fun as the games start to ramp up and the playoffs start to come into picture. And my goodness, a run through October for the Cardinals in that Discord server is going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you get in there. It is free. And if you'd like to join the b-schaeff Daily Lounge private chat within the Discord, you can do so by just signing up as a channel member in the Lounge tier here on YouTube. Lots of ways to support our daily Cardinals content here on the channel. But let's go ahead and get into the conversation of the day, which is Ryan Helsley will not be a participant in the All-Star Game. Derek Gould for the Post-Dispatch is down there in Arlington covering the event, and Helsley was down there. He talked with Derek today, told him, yeah, that's probably not going to be something that happens. I'm not actually going to pitch in the game. And then it wasn't but a few minutes later that MLB actually announced that Helsley was officially being replaced on the All-Star Game National League roster by Washington Nationals reliever Kyle Finnegan, which means indeed that there are no St. Louis Cardinals active for the game on Tuesday. Does it bother you as a Cardinals fan, is my question regarding the fact that there won't be a Cardinal in the game. Does it decrease your interest in the game? Because I feel like a lot of people, maybe as the years have gone on, don't have quite as much interest in the All-Star Game anyway. But there were certainly years where you could expect to see a handful of St. Louis Cardinals participating in the event. And I think that might ramp up the support and the interest and the intrigue within the fan base. But in a year where you know going in that you're not going to see a Cardinal appear, like if Helsley had been out there in the bullpen, you might have been wondering in the middle or later innings, oh, are we going to see an inning from him? And that might have been exciting for Cardinals fans. But now we know for sure you're not going to see an inning from him. And there was no Cardinal replacement, right? Like Kyle Finnegan replaces Helsley because he was the next reliever under consideration, I suppose, from MLB's list, because that's another MLB-named replacement. And so he's the guy that goes in. It doesn't have to be a Cardinal that replaces him. And Finnegan's had a good season as well. Like Helsley is up there on the saves leaderboard. Helsley leads it with 32 saves at the All-Star break. But Finnegan's got 25 saves for the Nationals and a 2.45 ERA. So he's a deserving All-Star replacement for Ryan Helsley. But does it disappoint you as a Cardinals fan to not see a Cardinal in the game? And what of it not being Helsley specifically? I honestly think, although I can understand some disappointment level in the fact that there won't be a Cardinal at all that you could potentially see on your screen Tuesday night if you're going to tune into the All-Star game, not the worst thing in the world that Ryan Helsley's not going to be playing. The fact that he's not going to be called upon to pitch, I think, is actually a big-time win for the Cardinals, and I'm mildly curious how it actually came to be. Was this something that was kind of known when Helsley departed from St. Louis for Arlington after Sunday? Was there a conversation with the Cardinals that was kind of, hey, how do we feel about this? How do we view this? In 2022, when Ryan Helsley was an all-star, he didn't really get the full experience because at the time his wife was pregnant with their daughter. And so I think his daughter was born right around the same time in 2022 that my son was. And that was maybe kind of a different summer for their family, obviously, with preparing to welcome a new baby within like a month or two after the All-Star game. I imagine, from what I understand, I don't think his wife could travel for that one. And so it was maybe not quite the full experience. This time, I think Ryan Helsley gets the best of both worlds, though, right? He gets to have his family there and gets to participate in all the festivities and the lead-up and gets to be there for the game, presumably watching, but doesn't have to pitch, doesn't have to think about being ready to perform. And more than that, from a Cardinals perspective, Cardinals fans in the club don't have to think about Ryan Helsley wasting bullets, right, in a game that doesn't have any meaning to it. And that's why I'm going to bottom line this. I think it's actually a really good thing that this ends up taking place, that Helsley's not going to participate in the game. And like I said, I don't know if the Cardinals maybe nudged him in that direction, if it was something that he was thinking anyway. A few days ago, whenever the announcement was made that Helsley was going to be the Cardinals' lone representative in the All-Star game, I said he's definitely deserving, but it's a little bit of I kind of was hoping that maybe he would get the week off, right? Would be able to rest and come back from the All-Star break fresh and ready to enter into some ball games in the ninth inning that the Cardinals are leading 3-2, right? Like rack up some more saves, because he has been an integral part of what the Cardinals have done in those late innings to be able to lock down the ninth the way that he has. 32 saves in 34 opportunities, and the two times he didn't convert a save successfully, the Cardinals end up winning the game, and Helsley got the win in both of those games. One was against the Dodgers, like second or third game of the season, and another one was more recent, the one that snapped his consecutive save streak. He ended up going back out, I believe, to pitch a scoreless 11th inning, because the way that the streak was snapped was the Manfred man, the automatic runner, scored from second base in the 10th inning. So Ryan Helsley more than earned his W on that day to be able to go back out and hold the Manfred man still on second base and win it in 11, as he did in that one for the Cardinals. So he has been fantastic. 2.36 ERA, 40-some-odd innings pitched. He's got a few more strikeouts than innings pitched so far this season. He's been really, really, really good for the Cardinals, and such a big, important part of why they've been able to have success. And look, he gives up a run here and there occasionally. It's been a little bit more of an adventure sometimes than others. But again, if we're going to bottom line a situation, we're talking about bottom line. Ryan Helsley has been the most effective closer in baseball, because that 32 for 34 certainly means something. And then when you consider the two failures were actually not failures at all, the Cardinals won and Helsley got the win. It's hard to get a lot better than that. But in terms of looking at the usage and why it might be not the worst thing in the world that Ryan Helsley doesn't have to throw competitive pitches in the middle of the All-Star break, which is supposed to be the rest period for guys to ramp up for the final push of the season. I hesitate to call it second half, because the Cardinals and other teams around MLB have played far more than half the games. It's really a push before the All-Star break, and then a not quite a sprint to the finish, because you do have to get through August. Those are the dog days. But once you get to September, that really is sort of the sprint to the finish, and we're certainly well beyond the halfway point at this mark, as the Cardinals have now played 96 games. I mean, they've won 50 games and lost 46, so it's you're pushing 100 games now at this All-Star break. 81 would be the halfway point. So before the final push of the season, this is supposed to be that part of the schedule where Ryan Helsley and everybody else on the Cardinals gets a little bit of rest, and now that is going to be the case with Helsley not pitching in the game. So on his usage, he's pitched in more games than all but 30 MLB relievers. I think he's got 41 game appearances on the season, and that ties him with a bunch of dudes for 31st, essentially, in baseball in the most appearances. 42 innings, 48 strikeouts over that span. he's been used a decent amount, right? It's not the most because there's still 30 guys who have been used more, but he's on the higher end of that spectrum. And knowing his importance to the team, I just think it's a positive that he's going to have the full complement of rest Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before the Cardinals return to action to begin the final push, as we're calling it. Again, not second half, on Friday night in Atlanta. That's what they needed. You just kind of feel like that's what they really needed Ryan Helsley to be able to have. And so however the decision came to be, I'm on record thinking that it's a positive one. No, it is not a signal that he's injured. I believe he told Derek, well, no, it's not an injury. This is just about maintenance and making sure he's fresh to go. And that's exactly, I think, where everything needs to be. Look, if Ryan Helsley really wanted to pitch in this game and it was going to be important for him to get to do so, I don't think the Cardinals would have stood in the way of that. But I also think he understands how critical the rest is potentially going to be to really provide that reset compared to if he's pitching in the game on Tuesday, didn't pitch Sunday, but did pitch Saturday night. So you go off day Sunday, off day Monday, but travel schedule, a lot going on that's going to entail. And then he pitches in a game on Tuesday. Well, you get Wednesday, Thursday, and yeah, he'd be available to pitch Friday for sure. But just to have that 4-day rest period in the middle of the season, I don't really know that you can guarantee to find him that at any other point. If you do, it's because one of two reasons. The Cardinals are winning big or they're losing big. And let's be honest, how often have we seen a consecutive stretch of either of those things happening in 2024? It hasn't really been the case. The reason Helsley has been used so much is because he is the closer for this team, and when he's available and the Cardinals have that 1-run, 2-run, 3-run lead at the end of the game, it's his role to go in and close it down, and he's done a great job of it. But it's just the fact that he's leading the league in saves comes also because of maybe some shortcomings in other areas of the team. They haven't been able to score enough runs to turn some of those save situations into non-save situations that he maybe would not have been necessary. It's a positive to be able to have such confidence in a guy that can lock it down late, but it's also one of those catch-22s where you go, yeah, you'd like to not have to use him as often, especially when you're talking about the first 100 games, because those last 60 games plus whatever the Cardinals are going to get out of October this year is where the real opportunity comes to be able to close things down at the end. So you hope over the next couple of months the Cardinals find a little bit more consistency with the bats to be able to maybe extend out some of those leads and not have to go to Ryan Helsley for 68 or 70% of the team's wins this year, because he's recorded, I think, 3 wins on the season and has 32 saves. So you do that math, that's 35 of the 70. And maybe he's pitched in a stray win that didn't involve him being the last guy with the ball, but I can't remember one. So, yeah, I mean, they've relied pretty heavily upon him to this point, and so the fact that he's whoever's decision it was, joint decision, whatever, doesn't really matter, I think ends up being a positive for the Cardinals. Cardinals fans, yeah, you're probably disappointed, but did you care that much anyway? Like, be honest. If you did, and this is going to ruin your Tuesday night, I am sorry, but I think it's going to give the Cardinals a better shot at doing what they want to be able to accomplish after the All-Star break and when the games begin to actually count again. So if I'm sitting in the shoes of Cardinals fans tonight, I'm going, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness Ryan Helsley's not going to pitch in this game, because we didn't really need that. Just think of the things that could go wrong, right? The things that could go right is he strikes out the side and looks like a badass, and that probably would have happened. Okay, but what does that really gain you in the long run? I don't think a lot. Maybe it gains Ryan Helsley some more in arbitration because people have that in their minds, and if it goes to another hearing, then you know what I mean. But I just think ultimately this was probably the right decision for all parties, and it seemed like something that Helsley was amenable to in the way that he spoke about it with Derek Gould in the video they posted, I think, at STL today. So if you want to check that out. But those are kind of my thoughts on the Helsley situation. I think it's not only is it not the end of the world, I think it's very, very good that he's not pitching. So those are my thoughts there. Quickly, I will talk about the Cardinals draft today. They did not have a second-round pick in this draft because of the Sonny Gray signing, right? That goes as a compensatory pick to the Minnesota Twins because he was a qualifying offer guy. I think it was probably worthwhile. But what it means is, yeah, you do lose the slot value, so you don't have as much money to play with, and you obviously don't get to pick anybody in that second round. So when the Cardinals were on the clock again today, it was 80th overall, and they selected, and this is going to confuse some people, a right-handed pitcher, Brian Holiday, out of Oklahoma State University. When you hear Holiday in Oklahoma State, Stillwater, you're thinking Matt Holiday. But no, not related to Matt Holiday. How do I know he's not related at all? Well, because they spell the last name different. Holiday's got 2 L's if you're thinking of Matt. Brian Holiday is spelled like, it's a holiday. Christmas, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, holidays, 1 L. That's going to confuse the crap out of people. But he's a 5'11", 203-pounder, 21 years old, born in May, so won't turn 22 till next season, out of Tampa, Florida, and pitched at Oklahoma State University. I'm just reading this off of the Cardinals press release they sent out. Sporting an old-fashioned high leg kick. That'll be interesting to see. And a 12-6 curveball. Sounds a little Waino-esque, except for this guy's 5'11" and not 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", whatever Waino is. 2.63 ERA in 253 career innings in 3 seasons at Oklahoma State. Also maybe pitched some in relief, 33 starts in his 55 games, recorded 6 saves. Not 3 seasons at Oklahoma State, 3 collegiate seasons. Finished up at Oklahoma State, also Central Florida Junior College and Florida Southwestern State Junior College. So a JUCO guy that was able to get the opportunity at the Big 12 level with Okie State and obviously pitched pretty well to be able to turn himself into a third rounder. This past season led the Big 12 in strikeouts with 128 Ks and 113 innings. Near the top of the leaderboard in all of NCAA Division I. That's 7th in strikeouts and was a guy that was high up there in the strikeout-to-walk ratio as well, a 6.7 strikeout-to-walk ratio. I've seen that he was a guy, maybe low 90s, could touch 95. My initial reaction to the pick, other than to say that it's going to be a nightmare in terms of the Holiday 1L thing, and it's even funnier, too, because Josh Holiday, of course, Matt Holiday's brother, is the coach at Oklahoma State, and so was his coach there. But anyway, my thoughts were, I'm going to reserve judgment on a pick that seems kind of underwhelming, but when you hear about the picks that excite people on draft day, it's usually the guys that, oh yeah, he can touch upper 90s, or he's got this insane pitch, or he's unique for this reason. This feels like another type of guy in the history of a long line of this type of guy being drafted by the Cardinals. Right-handed pitcher, not a huge guy. Pitch maker, not going to walk a lot of guys, can move it around. I think slider is the go-to pitch for Brian Holiday, from what I understand. And the fastball is, again, like if you're touching 95, you're not sitting mid-90s, so low 90s kind of guy. But we've also seen, like, Quinn Matthews is a good example from last summer, and I think he's a much bigger guy, the guy out of Stanford who's, to me at this point, maybe the Cardinals' top pitching prospect. It's not that I am anti-Tink Hence, but I'm just wondering about, all right, what's the current status of his health, and when is he going to be, like, is he going to be a starter at the big league level? I don't know. Health is going to dictate that. Workload is going to dictate that. But Quinn Matthews, 6'5", was not necessarily a super hard thrower, and now is a guy that I believe has added a little velocity, but he's certainly working his way up the charts as he's performed well in Double-A in a short stint so far, and I think ultimately is going to be somebody that we're talking about by not only the latter portion of this season, but next spring. I think Quinn Matthews is going to be a name that a lot of people are going to get to know if they don't know him already. I'm high on the guy. So my point with that is, if Brian Holiday just doesn't sound like the most exciting pick in the world, I understand, because he's I don't care about the height thing. Like 5'11", dude, I'm like 5'7.5". Granted, I'm not a baseball prospect, but I'm always gonna pull for the little guy, right? And in a world where 5'11" is little, I'm like, you give me that. I could do a lot of damage if I was 5'11". All right, I'm not the worst athlete in the world. I could have figured it out, but I just am not going to hold that against a guy who still throws 90s, and he'll probably add velocity, because guys often seem to do that when they get into the strength and training programs of the MLB teams. I'm going to reserve judgment on Brian Holiday. Had good numbers. I can't pretend I knew a bunch about him before today, but it does seem like, if you were looking for a reason to kind of poke holes in the pick, that it feels kind of like a guy who can make pitches with his breaking balls, big curveball, good whiff rate on the slider. I saw this from Kareem on Twitter, who you guys, if you're interested in prospect stuff, should be following Kareem anyway. But, I think it's interesting. It's it feels like a guy where, because you look on the different draft boards and the entities that do their mock-ups before the draft, and they say, oh, he was rated a lot lower than some other guys that the Cardinals maybe could have had, and could they have had Brian Holiday later on, is sort of an opinion that I saw floating around. And maybe, but I think it's important to remember that we don't necessarily know for sure what the team grades and rankings are for all of these guys, just because you can come up with a bunch of different outlets that do this on the outside externally, and they come up with their rankings, and they maybe didn't have Brian Holiday as high. The Cardinals feel like he's at the top of their board, and they're looking to go pitcher with that pick, and they have reason to believe that, look, we think this guy's a good player. Other teams very well might think so as well. So if we don't pick him now, there's not guarantee that we're going to be able to down the line. Sometimes signability always comes into play with it, and so do the Cardinals go with more of a safe bet if that guy's going to save him a little bit of money on slot value and be able to do some things later on in the draft. But from what I understand, the Cardinals really, they're leaning heavily on the collegiate route with a lot of these guys. They drafted Ryan Campos, a collegiate catcher, in the 4th round. Lefty pitcher Brenden Davis out of Oklahoma, so that'd be kind of fun with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State on the same draft class there. A lefty, so they go college pitcher, catcher again in the 6th round out of University of Cincinnati. Righty, a pitcher, I don't even know how to say this man's name, Andrew Dutkanich, pronounced Dutkanich. Dutkanich. I'm going to leave all that in there because it's funny. This guy turns out to be a Hall of Famer. It was me trying to pronounce his name. Andrew Dutkanich the 4th. Man, Chris Gardner, the producer for some of the old radio shows that I used to be on, Writer's Block with all the Post-Dispatch guys, and Martin Kilcoyne, Charlie Marlowe, their show, Midday Grind. Chris Gardner was a great radio producer. Now he's a doorman, which is awesome in its own way. But he would have had a field day with some of these names if he was still in sports radio, because he used to do the Ascot All-Stars is what he called it, which is just like if a guy sounds like he's got a very kind of uppity, comes from generational family wealth sort of name, you know what I mean? Some of these names are like right up his alley in terms of, I think J.J. Weatherholt would be a great example of an Ascot All-Star. And then certainly the 7th rounder out of Vanderbilt. Well, Vanderbilt, that kind of proves my point. But Andrew Dutkanich the 4th. Dutkanych. And anytime you can put the 4th behind something, you know that's going to be that's going to be a very interesting name. And it says here he prefers the suffix the 4th to be pronounced after his last name. So don't just call him Dutkanich, call him Dutkanich the 4th. I'll make sure to do that. Hey, anytime I get some preferences stated, I always try to go by them. Marion County native is from the same county as Cardinals pitcher Lance Lynn, so maybe they know each other. He's a little younger than Lance Lynn. Jack Finley in the 8th round, another pitcher, lefty. Drafted a 3rd baseman in the 9th round. I'm reading a lot of this as you are, because I wasn't exactly so locked in on the 9th round of the draft today. Forgive me. But I just wanted to confirm we're looking at all collegiate guys, and collegiate outfielder in the 10th out of OU as well. A lot of Oklahoma guys. Not so sure about all that. I won't hold it against them, though. It's not got nothing to do with their football team, so that's okay. So, yeah, Cardinals didn't draft any high school guys. That's kind of like pretty Cardinals-y, right? So I don't think they did anything crazy or off-board today. What do you think of the draft? There are people listening to this podcast guaranteed know more about some of the prospects they picked up in the later rounds than I do. I never am gonna be the guy that tries to pretend to know about something that I don't know about, and I haven't dived in on some of that stuff. So if you got interesting takes on some of these guys in the comments, let us know. And this is a great thing for the Discord. Join the Discord and start telling everybody, dropping your knowledge about some of these collegiate prospects, because the Cardinals went hot and heavy on those guys. And by the way, 2 catchers in the first 6 rounds across the first 5 picks, don't read into that either. In the same way that we're not reading into J.J. Weatherholt being maybe a shortstop. Well, they have Mason Wynn. Well, okay, he can play second base. Well, they have Gorman, they have Donovan, they have Edmond. It doesn't matter. They figure that kind of stuff out positionally as time goes. It's more about the bat. And when it comes to drafting these catchers, I think it's more about the athleticism. To be able to play catcher at the collegiate level, it says something about the player, and usually a pretty smart player, right? Good baseball IQ to play catcher. So those guys don't always stick at the catcher position, but it's not the end of the world to have more of them than you need, because it's a commodity that can be difficult to find good versions of at the big league level. So no issue with anything, glaring coming from the Cardinals picks today. I like the Weatherholt pick, as we talked about yesterday. Feel free to go back and check out that podcast. 3,100 of you did. Over 3,000 views on a video for us on YouTube is pretty solid. So appreciate everybody who went and watched yesterday's video. If you haven't caught the whole thing yet, go check it out. We did drop some pretty in-depth conversation about the Cardinals' number 1 overall selection. First round selection, number 7 overall. Maybe he was the best talent in the draft. That's up for interpretation. But a lot of stuff on that for yesterday's podcast, if you're interested. But let's move right on along here with the podcast tonight as we talk about the home run derby a little bit, and maybe the worst ever Anthem performance in the history of the universe. I don't know that it's going to get me into any trouble to play it, because I think it's just, I don't know about this being copyrighted, right? It's a pretty old song. I just mean in terms of, I realized that sounded kind of dumb. In terms of it being part of the MLB broadcast, I don't want there to be any copyright issues, but I'm just going to click at a random part of this anthem and hope it's the part that screeches your ears off. I told people earlier not to go seek it out, so if you want now, just skip ahead 20 seconds or so, because I'm going to play a little bit of it. Actually, I think that's all we need. That'll do. That'll do for that. This lady that sang it, I think her name is Ingrid Andrus. She's got a country song that I had heard before that was a fine song, but I don't know what she was going for with this anthem. I think there's a chance she did it on purpose. I don't know, to make some sort of statement. I have no idea. But my other guess would be, if you listen to the beginning of it, it's not like amazing, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It gets to become the worst thing that's ever been recorded in human history, somewhere in that like 30-second range or so. And it's very possible, and we talked about this kind of anthem stuff when Adam Wainwright sang it at the end of or the beginning of last year or whatever it was. I can't remember. Opening day, that sounds right. When he sang it, he didn't have an earpiece in that basically plays back the sounds that you need to be hearing to yourself, so you don't have the delay and you could kind of focus it's very possible she had a technical issue. Earpiece goes out, something that you don't expect, and then you're out there just trying to gut through it when you can't really hear anything because of all the different technical things going on. If I had to guess, it's probably what happened, but that also doesn't excuse just the horrific nature of what she did to the national anthem. So that's unfortunate. Francis Scott Key certainly turning over in his grave after listening to that one, no doubt. I do not think that's what he had in mind when writing that song back in the day. But, it happens, I guess. I mean, not to me, but it happens to some people, I suppose. It's a hard song to sing, by the way. I do think I could probably pull it off, though. Maybe not on that scale. And hopefully nobody ever gives me the chance to do it, because I'm talking a big game right now, making fun of somebody for having a bad anthem. But I don't know, you just kind of do it. You go for it and you get through it. You don't linger on it. That's the thing. If anything, I can say she had an earpiece problem, and that's probably true, but she attempted to do a style of the anthem that was unnecessary. Just get through the song, respect the song, and the song won't eat you alive if you just sing it and respect it and move on. You don't need to make it your own, right? There's a few people in the course of history that made it their own, and it was unbelievable, and they'll be remembered for those performances forever, right? The Whitney Houston anthem, that's kind of the one that people always bring up, stands the test of time. But you don't need to be a hero singing the song. Just get through the song. That's kind of my personal take on it. And look, when you cover ball games, you hear a lot of anthems because they sing it before every game. And it's the people that I appreciate the most that have a nice voice, but they just keep to the song and they sing it and then it's done, right? You're not the star of the show. You don't have to be, because when you try to become the star of the show singing that song, there's a chance that you end up the butt of the joke. And that's what Ingrid Andrus had happened to her tonight. Unfortunate, but life goes on. As far as the Derby itself, I almost said the anthem itself. As far as the Derby itself, kind of meh. The format, I guess, was a little convoluted in the way that ESPN went about not really explaining what was going on. Somebody on Twitter had said, if you tuned into the middle of it, you have no idea what's going on. I think that was Pat Dougherty that I was going back and forth with, and that was 100% true. Like, I just don't think they did a very good job of kind of keeping everybody abreast of, okay, here's the way this works. But also with the bonus rounds, and it's a little convoluted anyway. So, we always, though, find stuff about the Derby to complain about. We do this every year. For some reason, and I can't quite peg it, it just seems to me like the broadcast crew that's been on it in recent years, and it's Karl Ravech and it's Eduardo Perez, I think they kind of try almost to go over the top in their reactions to some of the swings to try and convince the viewer that they're seeing something crazy and special and historic. And, not every home run derby is like that. So I don't need you to pretend like it is. I'll be able to tell. It almost feels a little phony if you're trying to go over the top and convince me. But I get it. This is not an easy event, from a media perspective, to do. I wouldn't want to be on the broadcast because what do people want to see? Everybody's going to want to see something different, but there are going to be the people who are enamored with the exit velocity and the launch angle and that kind of stuff, and there are others who are like, stop shoving the exit velo down my throat. I don't really care. And so you're never going to please everybody. Bottom line, we talk about it every year, the home run derby. We complain about it every year, and yet it's on the Monday before the All-Star game, and there's not really anything else going on in sports, so we're going to watch it, And it feels like baseball knows that, so they can kind of get away with whatever. But they tried, to their credit, they tried to change up the format this year to make it more equitable, where you're not doing bracket format in the first round. Everybody gets to swing, the same allotment, so that you don't have a guy go up against someone who only hits 4 homers and then he hits 5 and he wins, so he doesn't have to continue. So it was definitely more equitable this year. I don't know if that makes it for a better presentation, though, and a better event. I thought it would, but then as it was going, I was like, okay, we get it. You're all going to hit 14 or 15 or 17 or whatever, and okay, you're going to advance. And then you're into the bracket format, but now you're already into the semifinals, and so I don't know. I also thought just the presentation was ugly to me from ESPN. I just want to see it look a little more visually appealing on screen, and the way they did the ticker and some of the different things, I just didn't really like it. And I know that they kind of have to do the split screen, but what was so great about it back in the day, I feel like they didn't do the full commitment to split screen. Like when Chris Berman was doing it, I feel like they would have maybe a little box on the batter, but you mostly are wanting to see where the ball goes and then zip back to the batter. I just think it's a hard presentation to do. And I know I'm just complaining without real answers of what they should have done differently. But I don't know. It was kind of falling flat a little bit, which is fine. It is what it is. This is like the slowest sports week of the calendar year because baseball's all that's in season in terms of the majors, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, those 4 major sports. If you're a big soccer fan and they happen to be playing right now, I'm sorry. I have no idea if they're playing. That's not, my jurisdiction. And there are other sports going on, but, Wimbledon just ended. Traz is my dog, Alcatraz, Carlos Alcaraz. But there's, golf is not going to be going on Monday. There's just not a lot going on. So we're always going to watch it. We're always going to complain. It's our annual tradition at this point to wish it would be better. And then every few years, you get one that's just fantastic and memorable. And usually when it's memorable, it's not because of the final. It's memorable because of an earlier round that happens where somebody just goes absolutely bonkers. But then that guy is usually not the one to win because he kind of runs out of steam as the night goes along. So they tried to figure out a format. They'll continue to tweak it, I think, every year. But still kind of a fun event. Cool to see the players outside their element a little bit and behaving a little bit differently. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was supporting Teoscar Hernandez, even though he's not on the same team anymore. But he wore his Blue Jays jersey from last year. That's kind of fun. You kind of get to see those little inside things from the players, which I think is one of the aspects that's cool about these events. But it was also cool, like Bobby Witt almost won the thing, and it was it did ramp up a little bit with the finale and getting to see those guys go at it. You had the swing off between Alec Boehm and Teoscar Hernandez in the previous round, which was kind of cool. Boehm, if you're a betting type of person, I think had the longest odds, was basically per the betting odds, the least likely to win, and it very well looked like he was going to make it into the finals and kind of couldn't find a way over the hump there. But Bobby Witt Jr., I think, would have been really fun to see him win. I got nothing against Teoscar Hernandez, but I was kind of hoping to see Bobby Witt do it, especially after the earnest reaction he had to Michael Buffer saying his name. That was cool. Like bringing in Michael Buffer, who I don't know if people think that his act is a little bit like tired. I always get a kick out of it, though, because it just does make an event feel big time. And he does the let's get ready to rumble. It's a whole thing, and it was cool. Bobby Witt was clearly thought it was like the best thing that's ever happened. They said he was turning to his family in the crowd like, can you believe Michael Buffer is saying my name right now? It was pretty, like, you got that impression too just watching it before the ESPN reporter on the sideline mentioned that that's how he was reacting to it. So that was kind of neat. Earnest, young guy that was he just thought it was cool, and that was I enjoyed seeing that. But he didn't win, and Hernandez did, and it was fine. That was fine. What did you think of the All-Star Game Home Run Derby, if you happened to watch it? And do you have a suggestion for something MLB could do differently during this week to kind of pump up the intrigue level a little bit more? Because I think other sports, like the Pro Bowl, nobody cares about the Pro Bowl, but I think the little skills competitions that they involve now at least makes for some good social media highlights. Like, you would think with the concept of a home run derby that there would be more buzz for it, and you'd see more on social media, and it would be more of a cool thing. I know everybody's just playing EA College Football right now because that's out, apparently. I have not gotten it yet. We'll get it eventually, and I would love to stream that as well as the show on the channel, but that's for another day. But like the NBA has sort of incorporated, you have the dunk contest and the skills contest with the little teams, and Antetokounmpo's got a team, and they do some different things to, I think, engage people. The dunk contest kind of sucks, but the three-point contest now is sort of taken over as, I think, the coolest thing, and they usually have some pretty interesting participants in that. Hockey has done what they can to try to make a skills competition more exciting for their all-star festivities. Baseball's got the home run thing, but is there anything else they could do that you'd like to see in future years? Let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts on that. Speaking of Bobby Witt Jr., though, I want to talk a little bit about the Royals because I think it's relevant to the Cardinals in that the Royals have already announced themselves, the Royals of all teams, have announced themselves as basically the most aggressive buyer to me at this trade deadline, as they made a trade over the weekend for Washington Nationals reliever Hunter Harvey, that when you hear the price of this trade, it feels like they paid a decent amount to get this guy. Jeff Passan reported the deal in the evening of July 13th. So what day would that have been? Was that today's Monday? So Friday night, Royals acquire Hunter Harvey from the Nationals on Saturday. Pardon me. Yeah, Sunday the 15th. No, that's not right. Today is Monday. No, it's not. Oh, it's after midnight now. Another thing that I'm going to leave in, you guys just get to see my creative process at work. I'm looking at my computer and it says July 16th. I'm like, okay, I'm counting back a couple of days. Why would that be? I'm after midnight. It's actually Tuesday now as I'm deep into this recording. So that's what happened. Sorry about that. Hunter Harvey is now a Kansas City Royal, and what they paid for him was the 39th overall draft pick in Sunday's draft, and then a third baseman prospect, Caden Wallace, one of Kansas City's top prospects. I mean, Caden Wallace was drafted in the second round in 2022 out of Arkansas. I don't know how much the hype has been sustained by him, but it's only been a couple of years. He played Double-A, was in Double-A this year, hitting .282, a 777 OPS. He's 22 years old, so that's a little underwhelming for his age. But even 22 is not old for Double-A. He's below the average age by a couple of years of that level. And, 777 OPS, so he's okay. Like, he's playing, he's doing the darn thing. And then to give him up, who was just recently a second-round pick, and you give up a first-round pick as well, essentially, the 39th overall, one of the few picks that can be traded is that competitive balance pick that the Cardinals are sometimes in the running for, but they didn't end up with one of them this year. Don't think they had one last year either. But the Royals trade basically a first and a second in so much as you can trade draft picks for Hunter Harvey. And his numbers are okay, but they're not outrageous. So a couple of thoughts that I have on this that I'll try to relate back to the Cardinals, since I know it's not a Royals podcast. He's got a 4.20 ERA in 43 games, so he's pitched a ton. Is that going to be a concern for the Royals? I was making it a deal to talk about Helsley pitching in 41 games. Harvey's pitching 43. 45 innings, 50 strikeouts. He's got good numbers on that front, but a 4.2 ERA is kind of like, it's fine. Experienced guy, has been with the Nationals for 3 years, Baltimore for 3 years before that. Career 3.20 ERA, 185 Ks and 168 and 2/3 career innings. So he's been good. Last 2 years with Washington, he was very good, sub-3 ERA both years, and this year he's ballooned a little bit, but, that can just be a couple of bad outings that might contribute to that. So I think he's a 3.16 FIP. I think he's a good reliever that, 7th, 8th inning guy for a Royals bullpen that could use a little bit more in that regard. But he also feels like right in the range of, if the Cardinals had traded for him today, I would have said, oh, man, really nice trade. I think they got a guy that can be in that mix for another leveragey 7th inning, maybe in a pinch 8th inning type of guy. And he's a right-handed pitcher, 6'3", 230. So I like the aggression of the Royals to try to, because this says, hey, we're trying to win. They're in a spot right now where they're vying for a wild card. Last year they lost 106 games. They're going for it, and I think that's actually kind of cool. That's something that we should respect as baseball fans, to say, hey, when you're in the mix, it should be incumbent upon your team to try to go win for your fan base. Now, granted, you could be cynical about it and say, oh, they're just trying to, look as good as they can because they're trying to get a new stadium out of somebody. Okay, whatever. I think that's a different department that's dealing with the stadium stuff more so than the baseball ops folks, who are just trying to do the best thing they can to run the club from a baseball perspective. But I do think it's kind of interesting that they had to pay as much as they ended up paying for a reliever that I would have said, yeah, good ad, Cardinals, if they had added him, but I wouldn't have been over the moon. And they traded a guy who was a second-round pick a couple of years ago. That was a different front office, I think it's worth pointing out, because J.J. Piccolo, although he was in the front office at the time, he was not yet in charge of everything. He was the GM as of September 2021, so that 2022 draft pick of Caden Wallace in the second round was while he was with the team, but he wasn't the chief decision maker necessarily, and now he's the executive, whatever the heck they call it. Piccolo is executive vice president. That's what they've called him instead of Mo gets called the president of baseball ops, and he's executive vice president. So at any rate, I think it's kind of interesting that they paid as much as they did for Hunter Harvey, is what I'm saying. I think it's commendable because it means, a team that has recently not really been trying is telling its fan base, hey, look, we're trying. Did they end up getting a guy that's going to be good and going to help them? We'll see. 4.2 ERA, but I like the peripherals on him. I think it's a nice move, and I just commend them for doing it, for trying to win. Earlier in the season when Luis Arias was traded to the Padres, we heard the Royals were actually interested in trying to get him as well. Didn't come to fruition. But those are the kinds of things that the Royals are thinking about. That's interesting. Obviously, they just swept the Cardinals in that doubleheader last week, but I'm kind of intrigued that the Royals have basically been the first team to, maybe I've missed another move, but to really announce themselves as a buyer ahead of this deadline by adding a little relief help, which is something that they could have used. I think the Cardinals could as well, but the Cardinals have a top 10 bullpen ERA. The Royals do not. So that would be the difference there. So let me know what you think about that, if anything. Maybe what you think about it is, dude, shut up and stop talking about the Royals. We don't care. But you know what? On this channel, I do want to try to do some other things and talk about baseball for the most part, but there are going to be some times where that baseball team that we're leaning on is not the Cardinals. And if you're a baseball fan, hopefully you'll still enjoy that aspect of the channel. I was looking to see what the rate for the Cardinal relief corps actually is, and I clicked on the wrong thing. I clicked on their batting average, runners in scoring position, and that's not a thing for the relievers. 7th in bullpen ERA are the St. Louis Cardinals right now at 3.50, whereas the Royals are down at 21st overall, 4.21. So only about a 0.7 run differential there, but that's a lot of spots, and that's kind of where the margins are going to be decided between, are you a good bullpen or a bad bullpen? Cardinals have a good bullpen. I think it has a chance to be a great one. I just think they need to add a great reliever to it. And then you're talking about being 5 deep with leverage guys, whether it's Helsley, Kittredge, Romero, and I'm counting Fernandez among that group. Add one more that's at least as good as those guys, and I think you really might have something. And then, mix in the John Kings and the Liberators and That might mean having to make a decision on Giovanni Gallegos, but Roycroft in the mix, Leahy in the mix. Kind of interesting. But anyway, let me know what you think. That's going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. I guess, well, wait a minute. I guess I could do a little down on the farm action if there was some. Is AAA still playing? Nope. It's Monday. So, of course, they didn't play. They never play on Monday. But they do. Nope. I guess they do get a little bit of a breakdown, too. So, maybe not as much to do with Under the Farm until Friday as well, but that'll come back. And I promise my guy Mark, by the time Under the Farm returns in its glorious fury on Friday, we will have the recording done for his sponsorship of Down on the Farm. So appreciate it, guys, for listening. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Let me know if you're intrigued by the All-Star game on Tuesday night, and if you're not, what kind of content would you rather hear me talk about? Because I'm sure we'll end up talking about the All-Star game if we're doing a post tomorrow, which I think we probably should still do, even if it's just a shorter one. But that's what's going on. No Ryan Helsley, no Cardinals in the All-Star game, the Midsummer Classic on Tuesday. Appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.